Today we'll be graphing functions on the graphing calculator. So to begin with, let's look at the keys we'll be using. When you graph on the graphing calculator, the graphing keys are located right below the screen. Primarily we use y equals, we use trace, and we use the table and graph key. So in regards to the standard graph, when we have our calculator, the standard graph is a -10 to 10 on the x-axis and -10 to 10 on the y-axis. So your calculator is only going to be looking in this viewing area. So if your values are outside the viewing area, you'd have to hit the zoom key and then zoom out. So here we have the standard graph there, and we get that by going to the graph key. And we'll also be using trace. So once we've graphed it, we can put in trace and enter our x value, our input, and it will give us our output. So it's basically like a table of values there. We do have a table of values. If you hit second table, the table of values will come up, and then you can find your corresponding output given your input. So let's do some graphing here. So here I have a function. Here I have some points I want to graph. Now certainly this is a simple linear equation that you can just substitute the value of the input in and get the output. But let's practice on the graphic calculator. So y equals 2x minus 3. So here we have our graphing calculator. So we're going to enter the function, which is right here. Y equals right below the viewing screen. Top there, y equals. So we're going to hit 2x. We use this key for the x, and we're hitting -3. All right, so we have our function typed in. We always want to check we did that correctly. And then if we wanted to look at the graph, we could just hit graph. Okay, if we wanted to see the table of values, we hit table, which is blue. So we'd hit the second key, and there we have the table of values, and we certainly could pluck them right off of there. Another easy way to do it is to hit the trace key. And if you enter -3, the output is -9. If you enter 0, the output's -3. And if I enter 3, my output is 3. Let's try another one. Here we have an absolute value. Y equals the absolute value of x minus 1. So we go into our calculator, and we're at y equals, and we're going to clear that. So we need the absolute value. So remember math over here below the alpha key. And then we're going to arrow over to this numbers. Arrow to the right one. That's highlighted, and that brings up our absolute value key. So we're going to hit enter, and then we're just going to type in x minus 1. And we're going to graph it. Okay, absolute value has a V graph. All right. So again, if we wanted any values on here, just particular ones, we could just hit trace, and I could type in -4, and it'd give me my output. I could type 0 for the input. 1 is the output, and I could type 3 and get 2. And again, I could look at the table. Second graph, table, and it'll give me my values. Now you can always go up on the x, but here let's say I'm in the y column, the output, you can't go up. So if you need to go up, you need to go make sure you're in the input column there. Okay, and our final example would be y equals x squared plus 6x plus 5. So we're going to graph a parabola, x squared plus 6x plus 5. So we go into y equals, we hit clear, x squared, so x, your square keys here, plus 6x plus 5. Always check that we got our functioning correctly. We can hit our graph, and wow, it's a U-shaped graph, a parabola, quadratic equation. So again, I could go to my table, and it would give me all my values that I could graph. I could also hit trace and say, input of -5, what's my output is 0. 0 is my input, is 5. -3, that should get me to the vertex there, -4. So that's how you graph functions on the calculator.